So, good afternoon. I'm Elke Otten from the Preventive Conservation Unit of the Cultural Heritage Institute, the Royal Cultural Heritage Institute in Brussels, Belgium. As the very last speaker at this Mechanical Insights conference, I would like to tell you about our tool, Agato, how it came to life. Even though I'm trained as a metal conservator and active in preventive conservation, I'm a bit the other one out amongst all conservation scientists here. But why did our story earn a spot then on this symposium? Our team has been able to translate research findings from conservation scientists, including several of the speakers from this symposium, to help heritage professionals in the field, in museums, in churches, and storage facilities. I would like to show you how we've used these insights to build our tool. The Royal Institute for Cultural Heritage, or KIK-IRPA, is a research institution established in 1957, and it encompasses laboratories, conservation workshops, and a documentation center. The most valuable Belgian heritage and art objects with complex restoration needs are studied and treated here, which makes KIK-IRPA a reference point for anyone with heritage-related questions. Our preventive conservation unit is often asked to investigate environmental conditions and manage sensitive collections or unique objects. Our work spans projects on individual artworks like tapestry cartoons by Pieter Koeke, or whole collections like the paintings of the Rubens House, also entire industrial sites such as the storage facility for royal trains, and various historic interiors. Through measuring campaigns and risk analysis, our team works to identify existing risks or causes of damage in order to prevent loss of value. The goal is to provide well-founded advice and suggest cost-effective measures that maximize the impact of often limited budgets from heritage institutions. While these detailed labor-intensive projects address the needs of only a few players in the field, alongside these projects, many more inquiries from professionals come in, and they are not granted as much research time. That is why we strive to make dissemination a core pillar of every research project proposal, ensuring that research findings are accessible to the broader heritage fields. The Art Garden project is a prime example of this outreach effort, and it was focused on a series of 7 remarkable and well-preserved enclosed gardens of Mechelen. And these 16th century altarpieces originating from the former convent of the Mechelen Hospital Sisters. They are wooden cabinets composed of countless little elements, made in a multitude of materials. There are brass and silk flowers, glass and brass berries, polychrome wooden statuettes, paper banderols, relics, and much more. The Art Garden project brought together a team of multidisciplinary experts, not only for the restoration treatment, but also to study the historical and anthropological background and the material composition and conservation history and the degradation phenomena, and to safeguard these complex mixed media objects in a new exhibition setup. We conducted a comprehensive risk assessment in order to mitigate future deterioration. This approach, together with the Art Garden project's findings and the literature study on mixed media objects, were the fundamentals to create the Agato tool. The objective was making this knowledge useful beyond this specific context for museum professionals with similarly complex collections to better understand the risks and make knowledgeable preservation decisions. Agato thus stands for Art Garden Decision Support Tool, and it was developed as a free and user-friendly online tool that will alert collection managers to the risk associated with the preservation of their historical mixed media objects. And it was to be fed by knowledge coming from literature research and the new insights gathered from research on the art garden corpus, as well as on our own expertise on risk analysis. While our fellow conservation scientists from the laboratories and partner universities focused on the degradation of materials like silk, brass, leather, and glass, our preventive conservation team set to work to realize the concept that José Luis Pedersoli had drawn up for us in the decision support tool outline for the preservation of mixed media objects. The tool was developed in collaboration with an external firm, a company, Multimedian. However, the time and resources required from concept development to putting Agato online was underestimated by both parties. Originally, Agato was only one task among 24 in a work package of the project proposal, estimating about 12 months work for an IT specialist. And Multimedium's quote provided from development to the backend interface and a functional end product, only 6 months, running from December 2019 to March 2020. Yet the process with our developer took over 3 years. This additional time was due to multiple factors, the COVID-19 crisis being one of them, which complicated and delayed many work processes. But the main reason were the intense and intensive consultation rounds that this process required to bridge the gap between IT development and heritage expertise. If you can work with somebody from the IT department within your own institution, you have the advantage that they are already familiar with your activities and need less explanation in terms of content. Hiring an IT specialist within the budget of our government institution proved not to be an option, so the assignment was outsourced. The consequence was that communication was crucial to achieve a well-functioning tool. The developer's own expertise played a vital role in making Agato user-friendly and in communication with users. This involved careful design choices for a clear and inviting layout to enhance the ease of use. You can see here one of the first versions, and you will see that it has developed ever since. Additionally, Multimedium ensured that users could intuitively reach the end of the assessment by implementing the correct visuals. The backend structure required much more discussion, especially regarding terminology and risk analysis methodology. We needed a content management system that allowed for a simplified and automated risk analysis true to our preventive conservation methods. This knowledge database had to contain all elements to perform a risk analysis, and the fields must also be able to be combined in such a way that they ultimately provided a reliable output. The content management system organizes all factors that could contribute to risking damage to an object, including environmental hazards, agents of deterioration, materials, material conditions, and even impacts of specific material combinations. And all of these factors also had to be a proper place and a proper weighting in the calculations of risk for an object. Through these many consultation moments about this, our developer had almost to master the subject of risk analysis to be able to develop this tool for us. Furthermore, the consultation also covered the structure that had to allow combining user input with the information that we had registered. And that brings us to what I wanted to present to you here, the information that we have put into this decision support tool being also mechanical insights. Our goal was to make all information and knowledge generated by the conservation scientists of Art Garden project accessible and practical to a wide audience. And therefore, much attention was also paid of how we translated risk analysis and material science to our target group. And after consulting an international follow-up committee, we defined our target as any museum professional or cultural heritage caretaker that is responsible for the preservation of an object or collection and in charge of taking preservation decisions, or all persons legitimately requested to support the preservation decisions. With this, I will give a short demonstration of how we incorporated scientific publications and material research into EGATO. It's demonstrations only with stills, because if I use the online version, it goes too slow to explain. But EGATO is freely accessible via our website, and feel free to follow along using the code, though it's best viewed on a larger screen than the display of a phone for a better overview. So, the homepage invites users to start a risk analysis for an object or to access the Art Garden project's research findings, and all separate research reports about our case studies from the joint research are shared directly through the tab Case Studies, but in the tab about the decision support tool EGATO, all publications that were used for the working part are also shown in references. By creating an account with just a name and an email address, users can gain access to EGATO's full capabilities. The box used here as an illustration was the primary case study, the casket for the crown reliquary of Holy Thorns, which is part of the treasury of the Cathedral of Saint-Aubin in Namur. And for this casket, the risk analysis was carried out as well in situ, according to the QuizScan method of Agnes Brokerhoff and Anna Bülow, and exceptionally applied to this single object instead of to a whole collection. And to obtain an overview of the situation, all of the 10 agents of deterioration are taken into account. The results of the QuizScan finally allowed to put former concerns of the collection managers about light levels into perspective and focus attention on more pressing issues. And it also provided a reliable reference to test the functionality of the EGATO tool. For those managing an object composed of different materials, like the casket, of course, or consisting of just one material, EGATO can generate an automated assessment about the risk that is a digital translation of the approach applied in the field by the preventive conservation team. For this, you enter at least a name for an object and preferably also upload a photo to serve as a support during the input process. As for today, I've chosen a case study that is half American, half European mixed media object, an early 20th century pharmaceutical scale, widely used in Belgium by doctors and pharmacists and manufactured by the American Becker family in the Netherlands. After naming the object and having uploaded a picture, users are guided through a whole questionnaire, which visually can be followed in the progress timeline above. And in the first phase, users are asked to input characterization of their mixed media objects and also characterize the environment in which it is kept. For the object, you can start by identifying the materials via the drop-down list. And in this first step, you're also asked to rank materials according to their significance to, in the end, get an idea of where the object risks to lose value. If it is difficult to assign different values to the materials of an object, they can also be ranked by occurrence from the most common material to the least common material, and this provides in the last step where structural damage could occur on your object. The materials included in this list are the materials found on the enclosed gardens. No modern materials are yet included, but this does not exclude that other materials can be added. The content management system allows for this possibility. And an example here is the currently running Friable research project on the causes of damage to pastels on paper and ways to avoid this damage. And all information and recommendation on pastels were easily integrated in Agato, and pastel now figures in the materials list. Now, back to the tool. If there are multiple materials in an object, like here in the scale, a user can also indicate which ones make contact with each other, or also which ones are enclosed together in the same enclosure. This is important because of direct contact of certain materials can cause mechanical stress or chemical reactions where they touch. In an enclosure, volatile off-gas compounds from one material can also lead to interaction with and degradation of another material. So following this, the user assesses the condition of each material, particularly also where materials interact, and this can highlight areas of potential degradation and at material contact points. And you can also use the little numerical labels to indicate where the material is to be found on your object. In the next section, users answer 18 questions about environmental hazard related to the 10 agents of deterioration. You can see fire, pollutants, temperature, light, dissociation, theft and vandalism, pests, relative humidity, physical forces, and here the question about water. They are all to describe the storage environment of the object. And these questions, they were well thought out and deliberately kept to the essence in their description by José Luis Pedersoli in the concept. The questions are reduced to whether there is exposure to a particular agent or not, and they are just to be answered with yes or no. This straightforward approach contrasts with preventive conservators' in-depth risk analysis, which might involve a measurement campaign to get a nuanced picture of exposure to, for example, light or relative humidity. The process is deliberately kept simple to allow as many users as possible to complete the entire trajectory up to the overview of risk warnings and recommendations. To support the user in doing so, all of the steps are also provided with the Learn More options, where there is room for some more explanation and also for all the references to literature. At the end of this questionnaire, a user can check all given answers in the overview, and the overview should summarize the environmental conditions of the object. A user may also always return to any of the questions if necessary, for example, when environmental conditions have changed. Ultimately, the results section provides the risk warnings and recommendations that Agato has retained and ranked for the user's objects. And it is in this list of ranked warnings and recommendations that the users can read what impact the damage factors can have on a specific material, how this can be detected, how it can be avoided, how to mitigate specific hazards affecting an object, and how to respond when damage has occurred. To this end, the CCI stages of control of risk analysis are used. It is for this the deliberately concise text that mechanical research, amongst others, was used and is presented in a very condensed form. In the warnings and recommendation, research insights and conclusions have been, in a certain way, translated by me and my colleagues for the broader public. This presentation is ultimately a compromise between the preventive conservator, who on the one hand wants to inform and warn a user correctly and precisely, and the developer, who emphasized that text should be kept as short as possible, as they are hardly read online and usually only titles are viewed. In our compact view mode, the risk warnings can also be viewed only by titles. This presents the risk assessment in a very minimalistic way, of course. However, users who wish to delve deeper in the subject matter can see and read all publications that were used to describe the risks via the Learn More option, and in this way become much better informed. For a mixed media object like the pharmaceutical scale, Agato can identify risks specific to material combinations, such as brass and glass, and include it in the list of possible risks. And the information behind each warning is distilled from more comprehensive studies. As you can see here, for example, Andrea Marchetti's PhD research for the University of Antwerp for our garden project that was processed to fit this concise text and is also shown as a reference via the Learn More. As creators, we are certainly aware of the balancing act being made in Agato between informing the user as accurately as possible while using an accessible but very short format. But our ultimate goal is to empower the users to take practical preventive conservation actions based on Agato's insights for improving storage and exhibition conditions. We have achieved that goal when a user actually really takes decisions about mitigation measures, addressing the greatest risk of damage. For instance, by making use of the possibility to duplicating the analysis of an object and adapt an assessment to changing conditions, or by printing the results of the risk assessment for a discussion with the manager about cost-effective measures. We have yet not conducted a survey amongst the first users of the tool, which has so far only been launched nationally in Belgium. But Agato has already proven helpful in its initial rollout, according to the feedback we received. But we further envision further development, and future goals include refining the tool's ranking system, maybe with artificial intelligence, and also using AI to help recognize specific materials, incorporating more materials into the database and ensuring multilingual use in a reliable way. Because some of the users experience English as a barrier and prefer to work in their mother tongue. In conclusion, Agato illustrates how research can read and benefit the heritage community, and we hope you would consider it as a valuable resource for museum professionals. I thank you for your attention.
Thanks for the talk. I wonder on that last point whether you see or where you see a balance line between professionally curated information populating your content management system versus developing LLMs that can scrape the scientific literature to build out that content management system. Because the expertise of the people in this room ensures that you have reliable data in the CMS to make recommendations and decisions.
But there's obviously massive improvements in the way in which finely tuned LLMs can extract information from the literature that allows you to scale the data that you have accessible to you. So I wonder, when you're thinking about AI, where do you see the balance of the expertise that you can rely on versus relinquishing some control to a large language model?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I think that's a question that I would pass on to my developer.
Okay.
Thank you. Really interesting presentation. Almost a fiscal force issue there. But one of the challenges in any kind of risk assessment strategy that's developed is validating the strategy. And do you have a plan to validate somehow that going through this process will lead to better decisions than a collection care person might intuitively come up with?
I do not think that it might come up with better decisions. I think it's if someone is not personally available to come on site and have an assessment done on site. That is the next best thing. It's only to get information to users that want to be informed and try to have them look at what could be important in their situation. So I would never say it will think better than what a risk assessment would do. It also takes you only 20 minutes maybe to fill out, and it's an automated response.
No, I kind of understand that. And I didn't mean better than, some other well-considered process or whatever that might be, but just better than nothing. Say, can we validate that what it leads to is better than nothing? Because when we start combining a bunch of categorical judgments, it's quite possible to end up with something that is not advisable.
You're right that if you don't answer the questions right, you would get an answer that it's not true to the reality of the situation. But I think we wanted also to have a follow-up project to work further and then look if you generate many assessments, if they are true to what you want them to be. And that's why I said further developments we would like to do so. So we have not done that yet.
And that sounds great, actually. I think adopting as many different approaches as we can is really our best way forward until we can sort out, what works in what situations the best. So, no, congratulations on moving forward.
Here. So it's kind of linked to what Rob asked. It's like, who were the users you were aiming at when you created the app? Were they like practitioners, or were it used also for teaching, for education, for the general public? Because it seems from text I quickly read, you said if you're not a professional, ask a professional. And then how many users did you have so far?
Okay.
And who are they?
We're between 200 and 300 users right now. I can't really tell who they are. I mean, I have access to their email address, but I didn't contact them yet. We would like to know, though, how they use it and how they found it. Some of them have contacted us to tell us about it, so that's nice. But our target group was especially not the specialists, not the people in this room, not the conservators, but people that are in museums or in churches, and they are responsible in a way of taking a decision and to helping them out. In a way, conservators already are too specialized and know too much and more than what is written in these texts. So I don't say we don't rule them out, because it's always interesting, especially on materials you're not an expert in. But the target group is much larger.
Just following on from Rob's point about validation, you've probably done quite a lot of risk assessments yourself, and certainly there are, a lot of people doing a lot of risk assessments professionally. If this process only takes 20 minutes, is it worth revisiting those risk assessments with this tool to see if the scope of the thing is coming out as a similar result?
It would. Our team has done many risk assessments. Me, not so many, because I'm the youngest member of the team. But I think it would. It was created following one assessment, but I think it is a very good idea of trying it. We in the assignments we're doing for when we were asked on site, we also run it. Also to see what it gives, and then we give our own advice, of course. But we already do it on the actual projects. Yes.
Hi, I really like the presentation, and I think even for professional, maybe it's a good start to use these kind of global website. We had to have a global risk assessment, maybe. But I want to follow what Alexandra said. Sometimes in museum and smaller museum, or even bigger museum, or even a place that are organized with smaller associations of people, I wanted to know how much do you need to know about the materials, for example. For example, I've already worked with people that were in charge of a collection that were not sure what materials were actually compose the object. So they have to at least have this kind of knowledge, I guess. Maybe where would you put the limit on how not maybe anybody can use that website?
We have deliberately kept the materials simple. Okay. We've told a lot about it, but we also work with subcategories. So you could indicate, for instance, just metal, but you could as well go for gold. And it works that way. You could enter textiles, but also go for silk or wool. So we hope that would help, and that a person working in a museum would at least know one of these categories. But on the other hand, if a more precise information is at hand, it can be subcategorized to some category and be more precise. If you know that it would be like, we've thought about making weighted silk a category, but only specialists would see the difference between silk and weighted silk. But we could create it if we wanted.
So that's cool. There's kind of an easy mode to the website, kind of.
Yes.
Then thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much.